Warning, playing FPL is highly addictive. It may cause stress, a loss of free time, a resentment towards friends or colleagues, and a dislike to football in general. Please, FPL responsibly.
Hey guys, and welcome back to FPL TV. Today is the fourth and final day of the official FPL price reveals, and today FPL have released prices for the final 5 Premier League teams, so let's get right into it. We start things off with a very intriguing team of FPL assets, and that's the Foxes' Leicester City. As per usual, Vardy comes in as the most expensive, a 9.5 million forward. Secretly, I was kind of hoping that Vardy would come in a bit cheaper here, and I thought that maybe due to his age and need for some rest now and again, perhaps we'd get a more budget-friendly price. However, in the final 3 game weeks of last season, notably Vardy scored 5 goals in 5 games and returned a massive 39 points, and that short burst of form perhaps added 0.5 million to his price. It's also very important to consider that Leicester, unlike last year, won't have any European commitments this season, and that could be absolutely key in less rotation and Vardy getting more consistent minutes in the league, so perhaps for that 9.5 could be very fair. The only person to outscore Vardy in those final 3 game weeks last season was his teammate James Maddison, who ended the season superbly, and I'm very interested in him at 8 million. What I like about Maddison is his importance to the team, his many routes to points, and also his lack of rotation without Europe. He's not particularly explosive in FPL, but he's a consistent point scorer, so for 8 million, you're getting a very solid, reliable asset. There's lots of potentially great value elsewhere in this side, and in particular, it's Ricardo Pereira at 4.5 million that has really caught my eye. Granted, we saw lots of rotation in that Foxes defence last season, and that's likely why they've all been priced fairly cheaply. But like I said, without European commitments this season, if Ricardo can nail down that starting spot, I'm very excited about him at 4.5 million. Next up, it's the much anticipated Tottenham Hotspur prices. And for the first time ever, Son Heung-min actually comes in slightly more expensive than Harry Kane. Following Son's superb Golden Boot winning season last year, he was always going to be in for a big price increase, but honestly 12 is probably 0.5 more than what I was expecting, and it certainly won't be easy to fit him in at that price. Kane comes in at 0.5 million cheaper, 11.5, so what FPL have done here is price Kane as the same as Haaland up front, and Son the same as Kevin De Bruyne in midfield. On the negative side, there's going to be some very difficult 50-50 calls for us to make between those premium assets, but on the positive, because they are priced the same, at least they will be fairly easily interchangeable, should one of them significantly outperform the other. Kulusevski comes in at a mid-priced 8 million, a much more budget-friendly way into the Spurs side, who put up some excellent numbers last season. But with some threat of rotation amongst him, Lucas, and new signing Richarlison now, it's yet to be seen just how nailed he'll be. Don't get me wrong, he should get the majority of minutes, but there's still a little bit of uncertainty and concern there. As for their defence, well, depending on who can nail down a wing-back spot, if that is possible, well, they can certainly offer us great value in defence here, with Matt Doherty in particular priced at an attractive 5 million, and also Sessegnon there at a budget 4.5. However, it's new signing Perisic that will no doubt steal most of the FPL headlines, as it's now been finally confirmed that he too has been classified as a defender. A big move. If he is a consistent starter, we have a very exciting option on our hands here, who throughout the majority of his career has played predominantly further forward and has a keen eye for goal. Perisic as a wing-back FPL defender could offer great value at 5.5 million. Next up is Crystal Palace, so let's take a look at some of the prices for the Eagles. As expected, it's talisman Wilfried Zaha who comes in as the highest price asset, a £7 million midfielder. He's not an asset I've had much luck with in the past personally, but I do think there's a lot to like about him as an FPL option. For an attractive 7 million, you get the luxury of almost guaranteed starts, no threat of rotation, and penalties to boot. Sometimes streaky with his form perhaps, but a solid long-term point accumulator I'd say. As for their other options, well, I think there's a lot of potentially exciting assets here, perhaps not ones I'd start the season with, especially considering their difficult opening fixtures, but the likes of the talented Eze and Elise both excite me at 5.5 million. I was also very impressed with Mitchell and Guehi last season, and I think both of those, as well as Guaita in goal, are at least worth putting on the watch list at 4.5 million. Next up is the Toffees Everton. The most expensive asset here is Calvert-Lewin, an 8 million forward, and I have to say throughout these price reveals, this is one of the ones that I've been most shocked with, as I really expected to see a big drop in price for DCL and for him to be 7.5 million at maximum, if not 7. Overpriced here in my opinion, but only time will tell. I can perhaps understand the valuation, mainly down to the departure of Richarlison, and thus therefore making DCL the once again predominant outlet for goals, not to mention regaining penalties perhaps. But still, 8 million seems very high here for a team that did finish 16th last season and off the back of an underwhelming season for Calvert-Lewin personally, only managing 5 Premier League goals. Elsewhere, not too much to report, with all of their midfielders released today coming in at 5.5 million. There's not much appeal here, but personally it's Anthony Gordon that I prefer from these midfielders, as I think Lampard trusts him and I think it's likely he'll get a lot of minutes. In what was a very poor season in general for Everton last year, I thought Anthony Gordon was one of the very few positives. Personally, it's unlikely I'll begin the season with any Everton players, but I think if I have to try and pick out some of the value here, I'd probably say Pickford at 4.5 million. I'm not his biggest fan, but he doesn't often come in at this cheap in FPL. So amongst the 4.5 million goalkeeper bracket now, he's not a bad option to consider. I also thought Mykolenko looked quite decent at left back last season, and he could too be interesting at 4.5. The final team for the price reveals is our third and final promoted club and playoff championship winners Nottingham Forest. Without trying to be a biased Welshman once again, it's main man Brennan Johnson that I was most interested in here. He played a huge role in Forest's promotion campaign last year and bagged 18 goals and 10 assists, a very respectable return for someone who is more naturally a winger. He was often utilised as a centre-forward last season though, so there were some question marks here on what position FPL would classify him as. In the end, they have indeed opted to make him a forward this season, but sadly at 6 million, a little bit on the pricey side in my opinion. Nottingham Forest promotion bid was built on togetherness, team spirit and a lot of trust in youngsters from manager Steve Cooper. The problem is that 2 of their best youngsters from last season, Garner and Jed Spence, were both on loan. And although they could end up being ones to watch in FPL this season, particularly Jed Spence, unfortunately it doesn't look as if we'll be selecting them as Nottingham Forest players. And so that wraps up the final day of the price reveals from FPL and finishes this 4-part mini-series on FPL TV. They've now teased us with prices from all 20 Premier League teams, so surely the official FPL game launch has to be imminent. Fingers crossed it's tomorrow. If you enjoyed this video and mini-series, then please do consider leaving a like and most importantly getting subscribed to the channel. You can also hit the notification bell so you never miss an FPL TV upload in the future. If you're interested, you can also view the other 3 parts of this price reveal series if you haven't already. I'll be back very soon with a first draft team selection video once the game eventually does launch, so until then, FPL responsibly and I'll catch you all very soon.